Whenever there's a little soul trying to make the most of its life, there's a bigger ego trying to convince her that everything's bullshit. Sometimes that ego's your own, and sometimes it's someone else's. But either way, it's almost always there. It seems like every time our society makes progress and breaks free from old ways of thinking, a bunch of online personalities pop up to tell us that we're the problem. They believe that life is nothing more than what we see on the surface, and they call us toxic for daring to think differently. Maybe we believe that there's something bigger than us behind the universe's design. Maybe we think that people with the highest qualifications, yeah, I'm using air quotes, are only taught one way of looking at things. And that way is often influenced by big pharmaceutical companies or other huge corporations. Maybe we believe that we have more power than we're led to believe, and that our struggles are part of our path for a reason. Where's this coming from, Melissa? Well, I recently fell down a rabbit hole of anti-wellness YouTubers who seem to have something to say about any perspective that doesn't align with their materialistic view of life. I do this sometimes for a few reasons: to make sure that I'm not stuck in a bubble, to meet people where they are, and to find my purpose as a bridge between different worlds. Sometimes these naysayers have valid points, especially about how things are communicated, and understanding their perspective helps me to express deep concepts in a more relatable way. But other times, they highlight my own hidden limiting beliefs, like my own doubts screaming at me through a TikTok video. Well, one of these conflicting perspectives is about trauma. We have made significant progress in understanding trauma in recent years. We now recognize that trauma doesn't require an official diagnosis, and that nobody else needs to validate your experiences for them to be considered traumatic. But just as we've started to grasp this concept, there's this wave of online voices claiming that we are overusing the word trauma. Are we, though? Are we really doing that well as a society? Maybe we're all more traumatized than we realize. Personally, I believe that something as simple as, having parents who didn't help us navigate our emotions can be traumatic. A word is just a vocal symbol that helps us express our experiences. And to me, trauma is something that leaves a lasting impact on our lives. So who is anyone else to define what your trauma is? Here's what I know for sure. When I stopped trying to convince myself that my wounds were no big deal, I was finally able to heal them. Denying their existence or believing that they weren't severe enough only meant that I was shaming myself for my own pain. We need to accept where we are to know how to move forward and in which direction we're headed. So that's my little rant for the day. But the takeaway is this: don't let someone else dictate your experience. Get in the habit of tuning inward and tending to your needs that arise from within, not the voices of everyone else, including mine. And this is so important because there's an age-old question, at least for those of us who are introspective. Why do some people seem to bounce back from life's hardest blows while others stay down? Sometimes you might be the one who can't seem to find your footing after a struggle. And like I said, if you're actively denying your pain or comparing it to others, thinking, why is this so hard? What I went through isn't as bad as what they went through, or I shouldn't be feeling this way, you are going to miss the lesson. Instead, if you can be honest and say, this is breaking me, what is the lesson here? And dive deep into that pain to uncover the growth beneath, you're going to change the way you experience your life. Our guest today is Edith Shiro. She agrees that trauma is completely subjective and that it's not always as recognizable on the outside as it is on the inside. She's a clinical psychologist and the author of The Unexpected Gift of Trauma: The Path to Post-Traumatic Growth. She believes that one thing's for sure: you need to acknowledge your suffering to find the gift within it. She's here to teach us how to transform our suffering into our superpower. So 3 key things we will learn are how belonging creates healing, how spiritual development changes your brain, and the 5 stages of post-traumatic growth that turn your pain into power. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's be real about something. Workplace stress is not just part of the job anymore. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal, and it is not sustainable. I used to think that grinding through stress was some kind of badge of honor. Push harder, sleep less, ignore what your body was telling you. And it nearly broke me when I was working for startups. And look, maybe that voice in your head telling you to make a change is right. Maybe you do need to quit your job or completely flip your life. But whether you're making big moves or just trying to survive your current situation, you need tools to handle it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without the guilt, how to trust your intuition instead of second guessing yourself constantly, how to make better decisions from a place of clarity instead of chaos. And BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They've got a 4.9 rating from 1.7 million reviews because it actually works. You can talk to someone from anywhere, and you can switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. A vacation won't fix chronic stress, but the right support can help you navigate whatever comes next. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. My listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Can we talk about back to school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their Smart Cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE.
When you're given a belief in a narrative, or you have an imposition of a story that tells you this is your story, this is what you have to believe in, this is who you have to be, this is your identity, and it comes from an outside place that it's almost sometimes oppressive, you know, your reaction would be either you're submissive to it or you're rebelling against it, right? But it's not yours. It didn't come from a place in you that really you can identify with. It's only when we break that belief and then we go through that process of growth and when you make it your own, that you can say,
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
What inspired you to start to see the gifts that exist within trauma?
You know, I really, from very early on in my life, I grew up in a community of immigrants and refugees, and my family and my ancestors have a long history of being immigrants and refugees themselves and Holocaust survivors and, you know, really moving from one place to another from being persecuted. And from very early on in my life, I was always seeing these differences in people, in saying, there's some people that go through really difficult things and they, you know, stay very stuck there and they're very depressed and they really carry that heavy burden with them. And then I see other people that go through really difficult things and they have like a normal life. Like they have a sort of like they've put it together, they can function, they can continue. And then I see another group of people that not only can keep functioning, do well, but they do really well. They thrive. They're like overly appreciative and connected with life and have a joy and have a purpose. So I kept seeing these differences. And in my head, I was like, how is it possible that somebody goes through something so difficult and still want to live and still want to have joy and still can find that motivation to go on? And I didn't articulate it this well when I was young, when I was a little girl, but I kept asking my grandparents and my parents and the people in my community how they were doing, and then of course studying psychology and everything. But really always my line of research and my line of interest was overcoming trauma, overcoming difficult things, having defense mechanisms to dealing with very, very difficult things, like how our body reacts to challenges and to pain and to suffering, and is able to continue functioning and is able to move forward, and what stops some people and doesn't stop others. So I kept being very intrigued by and curious about that thriving, that light that keeps moving people forward.
When I was growing up, I didn't experience a lot of trauma. And I think that's why it was so difficult for me when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and it all hit me because I was just ill-equipped. No one had really been talking about it. And it's interesting because my mom's side didn't go through a lot of difficulties. They still talk about that, which is funny because they dwell on little things, whereas my dad's side did go through quite a bit of trauma. And so I was thankful when I started dealing with mine that that's when the conversations opened up. And I wish that maybe I wasn't asking. I also wasn't as close with my dad's side growing up as I am now. Mm-hmm. But I know that your grandparents' trauma and hearing what they went through really impacted the way you were able to deal with it or understand it. Tell us about that.
It's interesting you say that about having a little bit of an overprotective childhood, or having, coming from a side of your family that did well or wasn't so shaken by the challenges of life. Because, there's this theory that explains that, oh, well, if you do well in life and you're pretty much having a very secure and protected life, maybe by the time trauma comes, you feel strong enough that you can face it and you can have the resources. And there's other theories that say, well, because you didn't have the chance to develop all these, tools to face difficulty, then, you're going to be ill-equipped by the time a very difficult and adverse situation comes, because then you're not going to have the tools until you have to face it and develop it. So interesting that you're saying it this way, and saying, well, I had such a good life until one point, until I had to deal with certain situations that shook me. And in some way, I did have the privilege and the honor to have a very, very protected childhood, and at the same time, always exposed to very dramatic experiences. Like I say in my book, I was fed with that spoon of matzo ball soup, all these stories of like concentration camps and Holocaust survivors, and on my other family, my family that came from Syria, being refugees and walking on foot to get out of the country that was persecuting them and that didn't want them there, and living in poverty to levels that you can't even imagine. Like I could not imagine, because I have not experienced that. So I think it had an impact on me at a level that was maybe more as stories growing up, but as you and I know, it's also all the information that I carry in my body, right? Like, because I have this DNA that carries information. I have this epigenetic, expression of this information that I'm living as well. So somehow I found it in my body that I had information that I didn't even know I had. So for me, working with, like, later on in my career, for example, later on in my life, but early in my career, working with Cambodian refugees was like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Or working with, Latino immigrants that would come to New York, and torture survivors. I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Like, I'm familiar with this stuff. but not because I was tortured and not because but somehow I had this information. Somehow this was something that I learned, and somehow me as an immigrant as well, going through it, but I was able to relate it to some of what was already going on. And the more I work with this kind of population, the more I was learning about trauma, and the more I was seeing how there are such different responses. And the very same situation can affect people in very different ways. And depending on the level of support that you have, depending on the culture that you're from, depending on the past experiences, on the age, on your belief system, or the understanding of, all those factors that I call them floating factors, can have an impact on how you live that trauma and the outcome of that trauma as well. I don't think there's one way of doing it. I mean, I wish I had like this recipe. Okay, no, if you do this, and if you read 3 books, eat this way, and sleep then you're going to be able to handle it different. But it's not that. So that's why I kept I'm still, this curiosity of like, how come you yes and you no? How come you live it this way and the other person doesn't live it that way? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I think we're always trying to find that simplified version of everything. Like, well, you had these experiences growing up, so you should be okay. But you can break down so much of it. I used to wish that I had parents who talked to me more about how to understand my mind, how to work through things. But because I was raised in a particular religion, it was always just like, give it to God. And I remember thinking like, that's not enough for me. I need more. But I also did have a lot of support, even though I didn't have those conversations. So yes, I had a very deep downward spiral, but I'm thriving now. So what was a cause of what? How much of it was me versus the fact that I did have support? Did I downward spiral because I didn't have the right kind of support, or was I able to dig my way out of that because I did? And so there's so many combinations of factors that it's really difficult to compare anything, because somebody might have had the exact same belief system that my parents did and certain situations, but maybe they didn't have something else. Like there's so many, an infinite combination of things that trying to figure out what came from what ends up just spinning you in circles versus figuring out, okay, this was the hand that I was dealt. The only thing I can change now is my perspective of the past and how I move on for the future. And so I'm curious, one of the things you talk about is post-traumatic growth. And I'm wondering, what is the difference of that and simply being resilient? One of the things you talk about is post-traumatic growth. And I'm wondering, what is the difference of that and simply being resilient?
Yeah, I love that question. And thank you so much for saying what you said, because I love how you're describing it. And that's why, before I say what's the difference between resilience and post-traumatic growth, I want to tell you that when I talk about trauma, Melissa, I always say the way that I talk about trauma, and I'm sure there are other people out there that talk like that too, or more and more these days, is that trauma is subjective, meaning like I cannot tell you, Melissa, what is traumatic for you or what made it traumatic for you. I don't care how many books say, how many stories, or how, what should be the one way or another. If you consider that what you went through when you were 15 or when you were 20 was traumatic, that's what it was. That's what it was. And it doesn't matter that, I can be a doctor and the expert in trauma, but I cannot determine for you in the same way that you cannot determine for me what is traumatic or not. So 3 things about trauma: one that is subjective, the other one that is relational, meaning like trauma happens in relationship, meaning how the relationship that you have around it with others, with yourself, with the world, is also going to impact and determine how you recover from trauma, how traumatic it was the event that happened to you, and also how you're going to heal from that trauma. And the third thing about trauma is that it's contagious. In other words, that, what's happening to me has an impact on the people around me. So yes, it might have happened to me, but yes, my mother, my father, my grandpa, they're all going to be affected in some way. If, God forbid, I have a diagnosis of a chronic illness, Yes, I'm the one that is suffering. I'm the one that is going through the medical treatments, but everybody in my system is being touched and affected in some way. And in everybody is landing in some way or another. These are things to think about. When we compare people that are resilient, that have the capacity and the tools and the resources to face difficult situations, and they can handle it and they bounce back and they recover, I always say it's a great thing. It's wonderful. We want people to do that. We want people to be resilient, to recover, to bounce back. When I'm talking about post-traumatic growth, which is the positive consequences of traumatic experiences, all the gifts and positive things that can come out of processing trauma. The one thing that I've noticed is that in some way, people that reach this post-traumatic growth have gone really, really low and have really touched rock bottom. And I don't want to say that it's a requirement because it sounds crazy to talk like this, but I've seen it more than in other ways, that it's the people that really break and the people that really touch rock bottom, the people that really are like in this place of like, life is so hard, suffering so much, and I see no solution. I don't see the exit to how I'm going to do this, or there's nothing else for me except to surrender to something bigger or to accept radically what's going on, because I have no tools, no resources, no answers, and nothing. And that's the moment when there's a shift that happens that really begins a healing that it's more profound. From what I've seen, people that are resilient are able to maintain themselves in a place that, above water in some way. Like even when they're pulled down, even when they're hurt, even when they and somehow break, they do have the tools to put themselves back together. And we want that. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's great. Actually, with post-traumatic growth, in the process of post-traumatic growth, people develop resilience. And I want everybody to have the tools and to have the resources. But something happens in this moment of total breakdown that is what pushes you to the breakthrough.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm reminded of one of my best friends went through the AA program, and I remember her telling me at one point, this was when I was still drinking, which I don't anymore, but she said the people that she met in the program always have so much depth. And I was like, how is that true? But now when I look at it, once I went through my own rock bottom and came out again, I absolutely feel that depth of connection with people that have had to excavate their own insides to really figure out how to move forward in life. And I remember one time my mom actually said, I was going through a period of processing my past and whatever. And she said, you just hold on to things too much. And I said, that actually feels like the opposite of what my goal is. Just because I want to revisit those things doesn't mean I'm holding on to them. I'm trying to process them so I can integrate it. And that's how I look at the difference between just bouncing back every single time and moving through no matter what happens. Great quality, but I see my path more as going down and up, and I'm going to the depths to bring it back to the surface and integrate it into who I am and become a different version of myself rather than just skipping along as the same version. And so I think there are different ways and there's no right or wrong way, but that's the way that it feels like that's what I came here for. I was meant to experience these things and bring it to the forefront so that I could help other people to process theirs. So I really love that, just the differentiation of those two, and also not making either of them wrong.
Absolutely. And you're very, very courageous to want to go down into those depths to come out with more understanding and to like a more profound shift every time. Because every time we go down and every time we almost like reinvent ourselves, we question where we are, or something shakes us or breaks our belief system in some way. It's like we go through life with some understanding of who we are and what the world is. And when that gets broken or shaken or shattered, we have to go back into the drawing board. And doing that requires a lot of courage, because you can stay with that whatever belief you say, no, I'm going to keep I'm going to keep at this and I'm going to stay in the surface and try to, keep it working somehow. The fact that people are willing to look at themselves and look at the world and say, okay, whatever I was functioning with is no longer working, is not applying, is not allowing me to navigate life. Let me go back and rewrite the story in a way that makes sense. Let me open up to new narratives, to new approaches, to a different way of thinking, to a different perspective, maybe from what I'm seeing. I'm open and willing to learn something different and something new, or position myself in a different place to see what that feels like. And that requires taking risks, right? It requires for you to say, okay, maybe I'm no longer going to do things in this way, or no longer going to be in a certain way, or no longer going to identify myself in a certain way. And I'm going to take the risk of trying something new. But integrating that, and I love you use that word, integration, because that's one of the stages that I work towards post-traumatic growth. Integrating all of that is what allows you to then really become a new person and to really grow from a place that you weren't there before. So, it's work, it's a process, it takes time, but I think it's totally worth it.
I spent a lot of years seeing my story with a victim mindset. And there was something addicting about that narrative. It's like, well, this happened to me. Well, this is why. And it took stewing in that for too long and realizing, okay, well, if I keep this story, then I stay here. I need to look at it in a different way. And I think what I had to get beyond was realizing that even if I rewrote my story where I was finally in a hero position, it's still okay that I made mistakes, that I made poor choices. And that was what was really hard to get beyond for me, because I would read these books and it's like, well, what happens if you re-envision your story where you're the hero? And I'd go back and I'm like, but I can't, because I did this here and I did this here and I asked for it here and I put myself in this position here and I actually just did this bad thing here. And so I had to understand. I remember actually watching a movie once and I was like, this guy's the hero. And look how many bad decisions he made in the whole first half. And it's like, well, I'm allowed my poor decisions in which to learn through. And so thank you for saying that. And you also you developed 5 stages of post-traumatic growth. How can each of these stages help somebody to heal, and what are they?
I would love to tell you about the 5 stages, and really it requires to be a hero and to have superpowers. It requires a lot of mistakes and a lot of downfalls and a lot of brokenness to be able to get that. That's really one of the big points that I want to make, and that I want to bring people to have that hope. You're such a beautiful example of that, Melissa, because it's in those places where you feel like you've made so many mistakes, or you've made the wrong choices, or you're broken. Is that when you're having that possibility of the superpower? It's in that brokenness and in that crack where the superpower develops. That's when you become the hero. If you're not making any mistakes and you're having like a pretty straightforward life, the chances of becoming a hero are not so high. Again, I'm not saying it's not possible. I think it's possible. I see not very many examples of that. I keep challenging my friends, because I have some friends that tell me, Edith, you always say that it has to be through trauma and through suffering. And I'm like, I don't want it to be through trauma and suffering. I really don't. But give me one example of somebody that has gone through really amazing hero's journeys and superpowers and have become incredible people, meaningful, with depth, with connection, that has not gone through suffering. So we keep having those challenges with my friends and I, and I'm open for that. I keep asking people, and I keep asking, like very big gurus. Like I've met with Sadhguru and some Buddhist monks in Bhutan and in India, and some rabbis, and I'm like always asking this question: are you able to get to post-traumatic growth? I mean, I don't say it like that, but are you able to get to post-traumatic growth without going through the suffering? And everybody has a different answer, and that's what I've seen. So these 5 stages that I talk about, are not even stages that I'm inventing out of nowhere. Is what I've seen repeatedly over more than 25 years in working with individuals, with couples, with families, with communities, in which these stages keep happening. And this it's almost like a roadmap. It's almost like a path to say, okay, I'm going through this like the same way of the grieving stages, of the stages of Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that it's not really a linear process. It's not a stage that goes, from 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes we start with 1, we come back to the second, we go around. It's more like a spiral kind of thing. But it goes from all the way from radical acceptance and all the way to, we navigate to security and protection. We have a sense of new narratives, we do integration, and then we get to wisdom and growth, which is where post-traumatic growth happens.
Why is radical acceptance a crucial first step, even if you do skip it and come back?
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm sure you can relate to this. When we are in suffering, when we're in pain, one of the natural responses that our bodies have to survive is that to develop defense mechanisms. And we all have this, and we all do this. It's like we need to protect ourselves from the pain, from the suffering, from the danger that is coming either from outside or from within. And by doing that, we develop either responses that are repetitive or addictive behaviors that protect us, or we do the typical fight, flight, freeze response that we all know very well. And that keeps us somehow safe and somehow in survival mode. And it's only when we're able to pause for a moment and say, what am I doing? How can I be repeating this again? Here I am drinking again, even though I said I wasn't going to do it, even though I know how bad it is for me, but I'm doing it again. Or here I am going out with the same guy, and if it's not the same guy, it's the typical same pattern of the same guy and having the same toxic relationship again, and I can't get out of this vicious cycle. Or I'm going through the same fight with my mother in the exact same way, even though I went to therapy and I talked about it, because there's something within us that is keeping that trauma, to be protected in that survival mode. And it's only when we're pausing and we're looking at ourselves in a way that is completely and radically honest that we can say, okay, I accept that I'm having an addictive behavior, or I accept that I'm going into a repetitive pattern, or I accept that the choices that I'm making are not so good. Let me just pause and name it and identify it and put a name to the feeling, to the emotion, so we stop those trauma responses from happening. And if we don't do that, we keep at the survival mode. We keep at the trauma response. That's why the healing has to happen only when we can stop that and begin to do this other new thing. There's something different to say. I'm surrendering to it, or I'm radically accepting that I've been doing these trauma responses, or that I'm depressed, or that I'm anxious, or that whatever it is that you're dealing with, in order to open up for the healing to happen.
It's difficult to see a pattern and change it if you're actively denying the pattern. And so
absolutely,
you have to acknowledge where you are. It's kind of like putting in a destination into Google Maps, but if it doesn't know your starting point, it doesn't know where to go. So
beautiful. That's a great way of saying it.
And so once we accept where we are and really the weeds that we have to start trimming, how do we get to the next step of safety and protection? How do we find that, even if we're in an unnerving situation?
I think this is the time when most people say, I have to recognize that I cannot do this by myself. Like, I've tried everything, I've done everything, I've developed all this, defenses, or tried, repetitive stuff, and I need to reach out. And this is the time when people reach out, and they reach out sometimes to a friend, to a family member, to a yoga teacher, to a therapist. I'm not always saying that, a psychologist is what's going to solve all your problems, but it sometimes is a retreat, sometimes it's a group of people, a community, a religious leader, but it's the time to reach out and say, hey, I cannot do it alone. I need some support. And this is crucial because the support that you get in this second stage is not so much to tell you what to do, because as you know very well, people can tell you what to do 100 million times and that doesn't change anything. Is that space, that safe space of validation, acceptance, and recognition, and which is what I do every day in my office. Is that space of that is a safe, protected container in which you can be yourself, in which you can talk about how you feel, in which you can open up in a way that you don't have to be defensive about it, in which you can say, this is who I am, this is what's happening with me, and the other person can truly see you and listen to you and validate how you're feeling. And I talk that individually, and I can talk about that in a collective way as well, like in a group of people that have gone through oppression or discrimination or bullying. It's until that kid that is being bullied finds an adult that finally says, I see how you're being bullied, and I see how that's killing you inside, and I recognize that, and I see how painful that is and how important it is to give it the meaning and the relevance that it has. And I think that's a super important stage to go through. In whatever shape or form you want to do it, there's no one way to go about it, but that experience of validation and recognition needs to happen.
I see this stage in so many forms. The first was when I admitted my struggle with an eating disorder. It just felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Before that, I was in denial, thinking if I ignored it, it would just go away. But the real transformation began when I actually integrated my story into who I was. Being honest about my journey changed my relationship with it. But then I realized my way wasn't working. I was reading all of these books, but not applying the wisdom. And it was really just another form of procrastination. On the upside, it filled my head with new ideas, but I actually had to step into a new way of being. Next, I noticed that everyone I admired had their own coach. So I kind of hesitated, wondering if I was too far along or too far back, or if it wasn't the right time, or if I didn't have the money. But now I just always have a coach because they helped me navigate faster, like a mouse zipping through a maze with guidance. And finally, I think this is important to bring up because I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a religious household, and I know a lot of my listeners relate to this. Well, it was always just give it to God. But I needed more. I needed to understand why things were difficult and why the same issues kept coming up. And finally, I grew up in a religious household where it was always just give it to God, but excavating of my mind that I could do. I still do it a lot, but I realized there was something else. There was a higher power, and at least that was my experience. And so I had to integrate both of these sides. It was really the final step of that and protection.
I think it's the final step for other things as well, as as you see as we go through the stages, because the third stage is that stage of new narratives. And I think you have such a beautiful example of like you're going and reading new books and hearing new other perspectives and saying, okay, maybe let's say with religion, God is not what they're telling me what God is, or religion is not what it be, because that's not the belief that speaks to me. But you're open to exploring other possibilities and other stories of what God is, or what a higher power is, or what religion is, and like finding for yourself like the dress that suits you, the perspective that resonates with you, the thing but that requires you to go out there and try it out and listen to different things, or then explore and take those risks, right? And then we go into the fourth stage, which is the stage of integration. And that the beautiful thing that you're talking about this is saying, yes, this is who I am. And who I am is all these new things and all these new findings that I have for myself and new stories that I tell about myself. I'm not just, the person that went through bulimia, or I'm not just the person that comes from a religious background that doesn't believe in that, or that, these amazing new things that I found for myself and these new identities that I have. And also, I do have bulimia, or I did have bulimia. And also, I did come from from this traumatic experience, and you don't deny what happened. You don't pretend that it's not there. You say, this is all who I am, with the mistakes of the hero. It's the mistakes and the downfalls and the challenges and the traumas that make the hero who the hero is, right? And it's only when you're integrating all of it without having the reaction. Because you can talk, like right now you're talking to me about bulimia, but that doesn't make you have all the symptoms of the bulimia, and doesn't make you feel like you're shaking or you're traumatized and you can't talk about it because it gives you so much anxiety. You can talk about it. We're actually discussing it. We're actually using it as an example. Why? Because you've overcome it, because you've processed it, because you've healed it, because you have been going through the stages and you've gone to integrating it into yourself in a way that it says, yes, that's who I am, and I'm this amazing, wonderful person, that has done this and has a podcast and has, and he helps other people and it's married and all this stuff, that it's you. And then we get to the fifth stage, which is the stage of growth and wisdom, the wisdom and growth. And that's, you already started talking about that, which is the stage when people tell me, wow, I appreciate life in ways that I didn't appreciate before. I have meaningful relationships with people that are even deeper, that are even more connected, more intimate than that before. This is a stage when people tell me, Edith, you know what? I don't wish this on anybody. I wouldn't go through bulimia, or wish it on anybody else, or have people have near-death experiences or have such an accident or a trauma, but I would not change that for anything in the world, because that makes me who I am. And this is the place where people begin to develop a sense of spirituality, but it comes from your own, from within you. It's a spirituality that is not what has been imposed by maybe a religious institution or has been told by other people in your life growing up. It's really, you've discovered this new spirituality. And I think you're talking about that. And it's a beautiful thing to say, I know my own God, or I know my own higher power, or I feel that I'm one with the world or one with the universe, and there's something bigger than myself. And that's the kind of spirituality that I'm talking about, that gives you so much wisdom and so much compassion and understanding.
I think I've read a lot of spiritual texts and I really found what the commonalities were, and the two that helped me the most was studying the works of Ram Dass. I actually kind of consider Ram Dass and Alan Watts to be like, they were friends. And so both of their work, but then also A Course in Miracles. And I think it's because of my Christian background and this kind of reinterpretation of certain things that made things make more sense. But they talk about thinking with God. And that is the visual that really helps me, because it's really the same thing as what Christianity was saying, give it to God. But the visual of instead opening my mind and leading from the universal consciousness, seeing it through that lens, rather than just, okay, give it to some man in the sky, it means something different to me. And it reminds me of what you talk about, how trauma is more about our interpretation of events rather than the events themselves. And so is so many other things. It's like, that's why words matter. One word can hit the exact right chord with one person and repel another person. And so we're sitting here with our religions making everybody else wrong, when if you really look at them, they're all very similar stories told with different characters. And based on people's culture, experiences, what they personally need, these stories are going to hit differently. And people are going to grab onto one and say, that's the one. And Absolutely. So I think it's so important, whether we're judging whether somebody's event was traumatic or not, or whether their religion is traumatic or not, just understand that we're all going to be grasping to things based on our own differences and needs.
Right. And one of the things that I think it's important to distinguish is this. When you're given a belief in a narrative, or you have an imposition of a story that tells you, this is your story, this is what you have to believe in, this is who you have to be, this is your identity, and it comes from an outside place that is almost sometimes oppressive, your reaction would be either you're submissive to it or you're rebelling against it, right? But it's not yours. It didn't come from a place in you that really you can identify with. It's only when we break that belief and then we go through that process of growth and when you make it your own, that you can say, yes, we can be talking about God, if that's the way you want to call it, but it's the God that I've created in my own definition of what is, and in my own understanding of what I can connect with and what resonates for me, not the one that you're telling me to what to believe in. And I think that's why breaking beliefs, it's so powerful. Our parents raise us with a belief system, whatever they believe in, and we do the same with our children. And it requires a very conscious parent to say, hey, this is the world. Yes, this is what I believe in, but I'm not going to impose those beliefs in you. I want you to look for your own beliefs. I'm going to give you a little bit of that containment and a little bit of that security and a good secure attachment so you can go and look for your own beliefs, because then you make them your own. Then it's not an imposition from the outside world. And that's why I think we all have the capacity to be spiritual. We all have the capacity to have this connection, but it has come from within. And as long as you have an outside imposition of it and an outside narrative that tells you what's right and what's wrong in a way that doesn't allow you to really make it your own and resonate, it can be traumatic. I have so many people that I work with that religion has become such a source of trauma, unfortunately, in some way because of that imposition. And it's having to break free from that experience in order to find your own voice, to then reconcile with the spirituality that comes from within you.
And I can see how necessary that is, because due to the way I felt oppressed by my religion, it just felt like it was being put on me when I would stray outside of it. It was like it was immediately wrong. And because of that, I really rejected everything really hardcore for a while, to the point that there was years where I was just like, no, God. And then even in the beginning of my spiritual quest, I would touch on things, but when it would get too close to what I was raised with, I would immediately step back. And so I couldn't even say the word God. It had to be universe or source for a really long time.
Yes.
And now, even today, I can feel myself working through that. And it's like, oh, why do I feel this tenseness right here? And it's like, well, it's too close to this. And it's like, but what if that is the truth, or what if that's what I need right now? And so I've had to do a lot of opening and softening to certain things to make sure that I'm not, I hate this phrase, but throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, no, I hate that phrase too. But I understand what you're saying, because even the word God, can be triggering, because it's loaded with whatever narrative and story you were given, that was imposed on you. So that's why sometimes I don't even use words like that, because it's like the way I use the word God is going to trigger something in you that it has a memory that might not be the thing that you really relate to. So, having spirituality, that's why I always, also distinguish between religion and spirituality. Religion, as an institution, as a way of having a set of beliefs, then it's not necessarily the spirituality that develops from a very different place. You can be very spiritual and not religious at all. And you can be very, very religious, as you probably know many people that are not spiritual at all. Right.
And so I talked about how, for me, it was like rejecting God, going down this path of really just understanding the body responses, the brain responses, realizing how far that would get me, and then realizing, okay, well, I also need the spirituality aspect. But I feel like that exploration was really important. It gave me tools that, when combined with the spirituality, make everything make more sense, because it's not that, oh, I'm doing this wrong, or God's not taking this off my shoulders because I'm still shaking, And so going back to the body responses,
yeah.
What have you found is helpful to know so that people can more easily work through it?
Yeah. When in my years of working with people and with families on trauma, At the very beginning of my career, I kept allowing people to talk about it, to work with it, to go through the emotions, and very, very importantly, to work with the body. As you know, as we all know, the body really stores so many memories that are traumatic, and if you don't address the body, there's a whole part of the trauma that doesn't get healed. But only and I felt like, okay, there's the work that is going and it's healing, but it wasn't as transformational yet. And it was only when I was able to sort of merge my whole life that was very spiritual with my whole life that was very clinical, and I said, you know what, I'm going to put those two together because in some way, coming from a very academic and very clinical environment, I was like, no, I cannot talk about such a spiritual thing and my spiritual experiences because it's like, it's not going to look that professional. And it was later in my life when I became a little more confident and more, grown up and more knowing that I knew what I was doing was really helpful and was really good, that I said, you know what, until I allow spirituality to come into my office in the way that I have it in my own life and the way that it's out there in the world, and until I bring spirituality as a conversation, not just intellectually, but in your body, in your experience, the healing of transformation didn't happen in the same way. So it's almost the healing happened to a point, but it was only when spirituality was integrated into the work that we really were able to get to the next level. And I think that's something that I tell the people that I supervise also and the people that I train, that spirituality is part of who we are. And developing spirituality is a protective factor against future traumas. There's a beautiful line of research done by Dr. Lisa Miller from Columbia University, in which she's put people through MRIs and through really examining the brain to find evidence, physiological evidence of the development of spirituality. And it's in the prefrontal cortex. There's a part that gets more thicker when you develop spirituality. And not only that, it's such an amazing thing to have as a coping mechanism, as a way of dealing with trauma, as a way of growing and becoming more conscious and more aware and holding on to something that helps you. But it also is a protective factor. It's been found that children and teenagers and adults that develop spirituality and they have this like thicker part of their brain, spirituality becomes a protective factor against future traumas. How amazing and beautiful is that? So when you develop it, it allows you to then face difficult situations with more resilience and with more strength and with more ability to then deal with it in a way that it's healthy and that it's powerful and that it's positive and that you can do it. So that's why it's like an integration, like it's a body development in some way. As we're developing our spirituality, we're developing it in our body as well. As we are attending to our feelings in our bodies, we are connecting that to something that goes beyond the physical and beyond the emotional, and also hold on to something that has meaning in life. The same way that I say about spirituality, Melissa, I say about the sense of belonging. That's another of the typical things on post-traumatic growth. All the things that I've said about appreciation of life and having more meaningful relationships, having this spirituality, also having a sense of belonging really allows, I don't know if you had that experience, but allows you to really get to that healing place and sustain that place of healing and growth to a way that you can keep going at it, because you have a community around you. You have people around you that you can go to, that you can have a relationship with. And I wonder what was your sense of belonging? How was that for you? Because, maybe you were given when you were little this community that was a religious community that you didn't feel that you belonged. And I wonder if you were able to develop again a different community that made sense to you.
Yeah, belonging has been a huge part of my story because I was an only child. I had divorced parents. I just always felt alone. And then the religious thing and And so I spent a lot of years shape-shifting to fit in. And it wasn't until yoga actually gave me my first sense of community. And I saw people were interested in the things that I would begin to be interested in. Because so often I would start to go into something and I'd be by myself in my living room reading and I'd be like, this is it. And then I'd talk to somebody who was a naysayer and immediately I'm like, oh, was it stupid that I just fell into that? I don't know. And so now, if I'm being completely honest, I still struggle with feeling different. But I'm going to change that word because it's not a struggle anymore. I just know that I'm different. I embrace that I'm different. I have very deep interests. And so it's really rare for me to find a community that envelops all of the things that I want to connect on. But I know that. And so what I do is I have my mom circle. I have my spiritual circle. I have my entrepreneur circle. And some of them overlap and some of them don't at all.
Exactly.
And I think I used to get really disappointed, whereas I would have like a new friendship or an old friendship or a family member. And then we'd hit this point of dissonance and I'd be like, oh, you're not it either. And then I got to a point where I stopped expecting any one person or group to be everything that I needed. And I started to catalog what my needs and my desires were and then find those in different people. And so here's the friend that I go to when I want to just be celebrated. Here's the friend that I want to go dig deep into all of the things. Here's the friend that I want to talk to about mom shit, like all the things. And it takes the pressure off. It helps to not be disappointed or have unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way of developing a sense of belonging. And I think that in the same way that we do that with friends, with couples, with parents, it's like not one person can encompass everything that is going to take care of our needs. That sense of belonging also has to be diversified and say, okay, there's a group for this, there's a group for another. But the fact that you have it and the fact that you can say, yes, I belong to the people that do yoga and I am part of this group. That's beautiful. I think that really, truly can change somebody's experience and say, I finally found a tribe that maybe can understand a part of me. And then I find another tribe that I can understand another part of me, that I can be, now I'm a mother and I can hang out with all the mothers that have children the same age. And, all of these things are pieces of ourselves that find their families, that find their community. And that's how we continue growing and evolving. And that's how we allow for trauma not to shake us in a way that can be devastating. I think that's super, super important. The other thing about post-traumatic growth that I haven't mentioned is that not only spirituality and a sense of belonging and appreciation for life, but in a lot of people that I've seen that are able to get to post-traumatic growth is that they find their life purpose. They find a mission in life. They find the reason why they get up in the morning, and something that not only they heal in themselves and they learn for themselves, but they want to share it with the community as well. And I think this is something that's happened to you. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking right now, because this is such a beautiful example that you're saying, hey, I went through this. These are things that happened to me. I grew from this. And not only that it's changed me, but I can also share it with the world and I can share it with my community so they can heal as well.
A big mental shift that I work with my groups to come into is I spent so many years trying to find all the things, find my purpose, find my circles. And when I shifted the way I looked, again, it comes back to that sometimes just a word changes the way you approach the experience or your life. And I started looking at myself as a creator instead of a finder. And what this enabled me to do is so many times I'd be digging for something, looking for something, and it wouldn't be there. And then it would cause me to question, like, maybe I don't have it. Maybe this isn't possible for me. Maybe I don't live in the right place, whatever it is. And when I started looking at creating it, it was a whole different mindset of how I approached it. It's like, okay, I get to choose. I get to make something from what looks like nothing and trust that I have the ability to make that happen. And so even with something like a friendship circle, I look at that like, okay, well, I need to create. What am I missing right now? I want the intellectual conversation. How about a book club? I'm going to create it instead of finding the one that already existed. And so it just kind of put me in a different place of power. So thank you for all of the things that you studied in this particular line, because I know how much of a gift my own trauma has been to me. And I've gotten to a point where I recreated the story and I lived in that story, and I can feel myself even in a new shift where I'm like, okay, I don't even really want to talk about it that much anymore. It comes up, especially in conversations like this, but now my focus is on the forefront, on what I am creating from here on out. And so I love to leave listeners with one particular thing to focus on, whether it's a thought experiment, an activity, to just ground in everything we talked about today. What would that growth work be for you?
Yeah. One idea is to say that I want people to know that trauma or difficult situations, adversity is not the end all be all, meaning like it doesn't determine your life, it doesn't define your life. That the reason why I'm writing this book, the reason why I want to focus on post-traumatic growth is because there is a light at the end of the tunnel, because there is hope after trauma, because there is the day after what happens. And that's available for everyone and anyone that is willing to put that intention and to do that work and to do that process, because that it's there. I've seen it. I work with it. I do it. There's so many beautiful examples, like you, like me, like so many, to say there is hope and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The other one that I want to leave you with is two things. Is a image of kintsugi, which is a technique that is used by the Japanese artist, and it's on the cover of my book. I don't know if you've seen it. You see it. It has like that, in which those beautiful jars that are like Japanese vases that are so expensive and so delicate and handmade, when they're broken, instead of discarding them, in the Japanese culture, there's a beautiful philosophy called the wabi-sabi philosophy, and they use a technique that it's called the kintsugi technique, in which they take gold powder with glue, and they start putting those pieces of the vase back together with gold in such a delicate and beautiful way that it creates a whole new piece of a vase. And it looks like it really actually accentuates the breaks and the cracks with gold. And the vase actually then becomes even more expensive, and it becomes even more valuable because those vases have gone through an experience. And for me, that's a beautiful metaphor and an image that I give to people. Sometimes I give it in a story like this. Sometimes I give it with like an actual kintsugi pieces. And I want the audience to take that and say, I can take those broken pieces or those cracks and fill them with glue, with powder, with gold powder or silver powder, and make it even more beautiful. And I'm going to leave you with a poem as well that relates to that. That is by Leonard Cohen. It's a part of a song that says, "Ring the bells that will not ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, and that's where the light gets in. And let the light come in." That's it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I have all the feels. Broken is one of those words that we need to redefine or re-envision, because it doesn't need to stop working right then. There's such an opportunity to put it back together in an even more empowered, strong. It's refurbished. That's what it is. Double tested. You're not broken, you're refurbished.
Absolutely.
So, for listeners who want to get their hands on your book and connect with you, where's the best place for them to connect?
So please go to Amazon or any bookstore, or even independent bookstores, of course. And, my book is there on hardcover or on paperback. If you want to have audiobook, it's in Audible. If you want to have it on Kindle, ebook, it's all available. please go to my website, www.dredithshiro.com. You can find me on Instagram, Dr. Edith Shiro. But if you go to my website, you can find all that information. And I want to hear from you. I want to hear, what your feedback about the book. My book is not only in English, but it's also in Spanish. It's in Spanish. It came out a couple of weeks ago. I'm super excited about that. And also the audible of that book is with my voice. So I love it that I can talk to people and have them they have my voice there talking to them. And it's translated in 10 other languages, just in case if you speak another language and you want to read it, it's available as well. So super, super happy to share that with you. Please let me know what you think, and I want to hear from everybody.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/354. So your challenge for this week is to just redefine your own trauma. Are there things that you've gone through that you haven't paid enough homage to? Are you holding on to emotions in your body that you haven't yet felt? On the other side of the coin, if there is something big that happened and you look at your life story as though this is the thing that ruined you, or you'd be worth more if this didn't happen to you, stop for a moment. That event is likely a gift if you really choose to look at it that way. And I know that sounds horrible. Some of us have been through some really horrible things, and you can twist this to whatever you want it to be. But that's just the thing. We can twist our life experiences to serve us or to disserve us. And if there's something that was out of your control that is holding you back, it is up to you to take back that power, whatever it looks like to you. And that doesn't mean that we're minimizing any horrible things that have happened. Quite the contrary. You are taking that power back. You are choosing how this is going to affect you. Is it going to make you stronger, or is it going to break you? That choice is yours. The response is yours. So let me know how it goes. If you need someone to talk you through it, reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. We have a lot of really exciting offers coming up, so make sure that you are on the list to receive the Morning Mind Loves. Not only do you get a boost of inspiration to start your day every single morning, but you also stay updated on all of the exciting things that are happening, including our retreat and the next cohort of Soul Strength Activation. And on top of that, I have a lot of really awesome free things that I'm going to be releasing soon, including a couple of workshops, some free meditations. So get on that list. Text the word morning to 33777 or sign up on the homepage of mindlove.com. All of my amazing sponsors are at mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
In the time it takes you to actually board that flight from Group 8,
Now boarding Premier Altitude Elite Club members.
you could have bought a Hyundai on Amazon. Yes, that Amazon, where you buy everything else.
Mid-tier Altitude Elite, feel free to board now.
So while you're waiting for them to make up new boarding groups, you can order your dream car and the dealer will have it ready in no time.
Now boarding groups 1 through 7.
So close. Visit HyundaiUSA.com or call 562-314-4603 for more details. Limited availability, pickup through participating Hyundai dealer in select markets.